Welcome to this week's Magic Wand Moment. I'm Lindsey Wallstrom, the Chief Momatologist at Rona's Fun Lab. Today, I'm joined by Jon and Jenn Wall, who are co-founders of Zaxbridge, a nonprofit organization that matches parents and caregivers navigating an advanced pediatric cancer diagnosis or who have lost a child to cancer with a trained peer who can provide support, engage in thoughtful conversation, and share experiences in curated resources. Jon and Jenn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
Our
you for having
pleasure.
us.
To get us started, Zaxbridge is named after your son, Zach, who died in 2021. What was your favorite thing about Zach?
My favorite thing about Zach was his sense of humor and his love of animals. He had a very sarcastic sense of humor, which he clearly got from both of his parents. And as he was really becoming a teenager and we got to spend that time with him during his illness, it really started to blossom. But he and I really bonded over a love of animals, especially dogs. But he also loved horses as well.
Jon, what about you?
Eh, Yeah, it's so hard to pick just one thing, but I think so much about this ingrained sense of compassion and empathy that he had. He would always volunteer to try to help other people. He would, after years of effort by us, he would always say please and thank you.
Oh,
He was so grateful for all the people that, provided support and help for him before he got sick, while he was sick. And he just had this sense of just desire to help other people, which was amazing.
I see that a lot in the work that you do. I read a little bit from your website at the beginning, but I'd love if you could, in your own words, just explain more about what you do at Zaxbridge.
Absolutely. So, when Zach was sick and when we got to the end and they told us that he was terminal and into bereavement, we searched for something we couldn't find. And that was the ability to connect with parents that had lost a child to cancer in a one-to-one fashion. And there's great support for families while you're in diagnosis and treatment and into survivorship. And there's some bereavement programs out there, but a lot of them are groups. And they're all like, oh, well, next group starts in 3 months. Well, I need support now, right? And so there was this huge gap in finding ways to have one-to-one meaningful, deep, heartfelt conversations with somebody who knew the secret handshake and had gone through it. And we experienced that ourselves. We talked to so many other families that have felt that, both in that end stage, what we call pre-bereavement, and into bereavement. And so we decided to fill that gap with meaning and bridge that gap. That's one of the reasons we're called Zach's Bridge, and provide a way for parents going through what we did to connect with trained, experienced peers who can have one-to-one meaningful conversations, really at the support seeker's request.
We've talked about this a bit before, but for me, that pre-bereavement support was really critical. I love the term also pre-bereavement because it is anticipatory and you are grieving, and it is pre-bereavement because you know that that's where you're headed. Um, and for me, getting matched to someone was just there was one other person who someone knew of, and we connected that way. I'm wondering, how do you choose your peer matches?
So I do all of the intakes when we have a new support seeker. And if there's a dad, John joins me. But if it's just a mom, it's usually just me. And one of the important questions during that intake is what would be important to you in matching with a peer mentor? And it
Mm,
kind of breaks down into three different areas. One is I'd like a peer mentor whose child had a similar or the same kind of cancer. And we can't always do the exact same cancer, but, if it's a child that has brain cancer, I have several other peers that have a child with brain cancer. Sometimes it's about the age and gender of a child. It's very different to parent a teenager like we did through cancer as opposed to a very young child, toddler, or a really young school age child. But what I find most often is it's about something in the family dynamic. I'm a single mom. I'm a mom of twins. I'm an only child mom. We actually have two moms of twins who are peers, and at this point, we have one support seeker who's a mom of twins. Because those unique experiences are what is able to connect these two people and allow them to have these really meaningful interactions between them very quickly. There's not like a ramping up of getting to know each other because you have this thing in common. Sometimes it's about surviving children. There's all sorts of different things. But that's the first thing that I really try and match someone on. If there are other things, I try and do that too. But I always ask the support seeker, what's the most important? And sometimes they say, I don't know. But usually they have an idea of what is the most important commonality between themselves and their peer mentor.
Yeah. That one-to-one matching piece I think is so critical. One of the things I think that surprised me most after we lost Rona was that you have to be ready to step into a support group setting. And I don't think everyone fully understands that you're gonna be in a space where your grief isn't the only grief there. So I really like that. Um do do you have those supports, and are you supporting other families in the process, or do you stay more out of that direct peer support for folks?
So John and I were the first two original peers for Zaxbridge, and we were very intentional about when we started to train new peers, because we didn't want to have an uneven ratio of peer mentors to support seekers.
Right.
So at this time last year, we were still the only peers. We now have 22, including John and I, peer mentors.
Wow.
At this point, John and I try not to take on new support seekers because there is so many things to do with our organization, and on top of that, for me, I am a licensed social worker, and so there's a little bit of a boundary, issue with for me at times, and so I try and stay away from that. But if we're the right person, I don't think we would say, "We're not going to match you with us because that's the right match." But the idea is that we have as many, we have more people who can meet those, those requirements. But every peer mentor that volunteers for Zaxbridge, including John and I, are still support seekers. We are all bereaved parents.
Yeah.
And so what we find is that for ourselves, and many of our peer mentors have told us this, that they find mentoring therapeutic for them as well. And John and I can definitely say that that's absolutely the case, that it's therapeutic for us as much as the support that the support seeker is getting from us.
Yeah.
Hey, Lindsay, can I add one thing? Just
Please.
you because you made a comment earlier about groups and all that. I think when you're going through grief or anything like like this in a lot of ways, um, you know, getting peer support isn't for everybody, right? Getting
Uh-huh.
therapy isn't for everybody. But when you do need peer support, there's kind of a menu of choices. And sometimes you want to try everything. You want an appetizer, you want a main course, and you want a dessert. Sometimes people want, um, just really, really want one to one, which is great. And we know plenty of people that we're working with that aren't in any groups. We know people that, um, are working with us one to one and are in groups, and they're virtual groups, and they are in person groups and conferences. Go to retreats. Everybody's different, and the
Yeah.
most important thing is that that menu of choice exists, and that people can find the support they need.
Absolutely. I think that's really well said, John, that it's really a different experience for every single person. What I meant to say really is that what resonates with me with the peer-to-peer piece is that you can get that tailored thing. And I love that. And I want to pivot a little bit to Zach's celebration of life because there's something in that nugget of truth there. Um, you outline 9 rules to live by. And they're on your website, so I hope it's okay that I talk about them a little bit, but I fell in love with them when I read them. Um, Everything in those rules from tell those you love that you love them, absolutely, every chance you get, to when someone has cancer, turn toward them, check on them, don't stop, stay with them. And so I think that really resonates. And it's almost like you've written the manifesto for bereaved parents and the way that people step in to really help and support one another. I see a lot of your work, especially in that last one. And so, how do you incorporate the rest of the rules into your work? And really, do you each have a favorite one that you love to live by?
You know, they came about because of Zach's celebration of life. They are inspired by the way Zach lived his life. And everything that we do the minute we get out of bed in the morning is to honor Zach's legacy. So many of those rules are truly about how it's our manifesto. It's how we live our life. Not everybody does that, but it's what works for us. And so because he's our only child, this is what we do. This is how we live our entire lives. People probably get sick of hearing us talk about Zaxbridge at times because John and I talk about it all the time. And because it's so important to what we do every day, and how we feel a sense of satisfaction every day. I can tell you that if Zach was here, he probably would say, "Why are you guys doing this?" Because it would not appeal to him. Um, he would want to do something with animals or supercars or YouTube videos or something. But this is what we saw was a gap, and how we really and we saw that very quickly. I mean, we started talking about Zaxbridge, at least as an idea, very quickly after we lost Zach. We mentored sort of informally a couple of people, a couple of parents, because that was what was important to us. If I had a favorite rule, I would probably say it's stay busy doing lots of things, find your passion and go deep and learn everything you can about them and then learn more. I was a knitter my whole life. I taught myself to crochet recently. John can tell you there's a yarn hoard in our guest room, and I have a little problem with yarn, but it's something that I have taught myself to do, and really I find a lot of satisfaction in it. It keeps me occupied. It keeps my hands busy, so I'm not doom scrolling or stuffing my face. It's very satisfying. And Zach was so that was so Zach. Zach had very severe ADHD, but when it was something that he was passionate about, he could tell you every single minute detail of everything associated with it. And so I try and live my life that way. I'm not a degrees of gray. I'm much more of a black and white person, which is not always a good thing, but I get very passionate about things. And so when I went back to school after Zach passed away, I went back and got my MSW. That was in part because of the care that Zach received towards the end of his life by pediatric palliative care. And I became a pediatric palliative care social worker because of the care that he received. If I wasn't doing Zach's Bridge, I would be a pediatric palliative care social worker, and I'm still incredibly passionate about it.
Amazing.
And I think for me, first of all, I think the rules for life came about because we wanted to take what we learned from Zach and we learned on the journey and share them out with people. Because while we miss Zach and wish we weren't have these stories to tell, we want good things to come from this, right? We want people to take this and we talk about grief giving you choices, right? You don't have to let grief win. You can turn your grief into action, and that's something we want to do. Not everybody can or wants to do that, and that's okay. But I think when it gets to one rule, right? And we talk about these all the time. We go to, I don't know how many different, conferences and events we've done, and, tens of thousands, at least 10,000 people at this point have heard these in person. But the one rule that, gets me, really focused is be like Zach, keep moving forward. Zach had so much resilience in him, um, and so much just from the start, just because he had social and emotional challenges and constantly got knocked down in life and just kept on going. And when he was sick, he had his left leg amputated above the knee, and just really wanted to learn how to walk and keep moving forward. So it's just such a metaphor for what we're trying to do and take this tragedy, and this is what motivates us and gets us out of bed in the morning, to try to help others and keep trying to make a very complex world a little bit better every day.
It's a perfect segue to my second to last question. Um, so the name of this series is Magic Wand Moment, and the idea behind that is I'm going to ask each of you this question. If I handed you a magic wand today and I said you can make one wish, and the only rule is that the wish has to be for a change in how we deliver pediatric care, either to children or to their parents, what would your magic wand wish be and why?
It's hard to just have one wish, right? The most obvious one is obviously cancer didn't exist, right? And there's lots of people working on that. However, inside of that, which is the obvious one, the one that's I think really applicable for me, and looking at the work we're doing and all of that, is that there was i- greater awareness of, understanding, and willingness to talk about grief, whether it's loss of a child, loss of a parent, loss of whatever, right? Because people get what Jen calls grief cooties and they run away and they don't know what to say and do. And this is just unfortunately a normal part of life for lots of people. Everybody will lose somebody at some point, and making it okay for people to talk about bereavement and loss, but also all the things that happened to you in that pre-bereavement period, and all of that. It doesn't have to be hidden away, and something that is taboo. It should be something everybody just talks about because it's part of life, and that those conversations help people face the unimaginable.
I would echo everything John says. And in addition, I think I would love to see that even though there is much less pediatric cancer in the world than there is adult cancer, that it would receive the same amount of importance, attention, um, focus that some of the adult cancers have gotten already.
Mhm.
I know that there has been advances in certain pediatric cancers, but not in others. And I think part of that is they're very difficult to treat. But they're all a lot of them, including the cancer that Zach had, are considered rare cancers or rare diseases. And so less than 1,000 people a year in the United States get Zach's kind of cancer, as an example. But just because it's less common, to me, it's still horrible and it still should receive the same amount of attention, support, research, etc., that the breast cancers, the colon cancers, the leukemias of the world are getting.
Mhm. I'm gonna pause there, and I'm gonna thank you both so much for joining me today. It's really been an honor to learn more about Zach and your work. I think sharing your child is such a precious and sacred space, and so I'm honored that you chose to do that with me. Um, Last question is, where is the best place for people to learn more about your work?
It would be our website, zachsbridge.org, ZACHSBRIDGE. If you misspell Zach with a K, you'll still get there. Don't worry. You can also find us, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, with that same handle. So please come and visit. We'd love to drop us a note, right? We'd love to hear from people. We're actively looking for new people that need support that are pediatric cancer families. We're also actively looking for people that want to become peer mentors that have the experience and are ready to give back and share some of their experience with others to make it a little bit easy. So, Lindsay, we just appreciate the opportunity to share Zach. And what we've learned. And like you said, it's the worst club. We wish we never met you, but we do meet some of the most amazing people. So we're grateful to have met you and for this opportunity.
Likewise. Thank you both so much. Have a great day, and thanks to everyone who's watching. We will put the link in the notes, and we'll share that out. So, anyone, I would strongly encourage everyone who's going through the process, or even just supporting families who are in the trenches, to go to the website, learn more about your services.